that post-breakup power play. Like, what is that all about? Because these post-breakup power plays with narcissists, it's just like, it's a complete crap fest. It's like full-blown poopapalooza. And it's important that we understand that this, this crap fest that we might find ourselves in, where it comes from. And for the most part, it's just the misfortune of having a narcissist just kind of come into our lives. Because there's so many things after these relationships end that you really have to be careful of. One of them could be just stalking and just repeated harassment and be really toxic behavior. Because these relationships don't end smoothly. They don't have all the loose ends tied up. Because, you can imagine it's just like you just delivered, the perfect breakup speech of a lifetime, and you feel like you freed yourself from the clutches of a narcissist. And you may think, oh, God, great, I did the speech. The credits are going to roll. This relationship is going to be over. But no, the show is far from over. After the curtain falls, many victims of narcissism just find themselves in that same horror film. It's like escaping from a relentless knife-wielding, movie slasher, only to realize that you're now running from a zombie that just won't stop chasing you. They just keep coming and coming and coming. And this behavior, this chasing, it actually has a pretty interesting name. It's called hoovering, like right after the vacuum cleaner. And it's just another tactic that they use, basically trying to, suck you right back into that toxic vortex that you were once in. And sadly, many victims, get hoovered back, leading to more drama and more abuse and more trauma than you ever imagined. You think that if you take your abuser back, that the behavior would end, that you set some boundaries. What you end up finding is that no, it's just like after you survive that one tornado, it comes back. And this time you're in the middle of another tornado, but this one is a sharknado. This is more intense, more air, more everything, and there's sharks biting you. And you start thinking, oh my God, this second tornado is far worse than the first one. Which is like if you're in a crappy tornado that's really bad and you escape, and you see this invitation, and another tornado comes, it's a big red flag. It's just remember to be more cautious. And there's so many little subtle things, teeny weeny little subtle things that narcissists will do to just kind of get that hoovering behavior going. And there's one that I find is a real head scratcher. It's just like, it's total nut sauce, but it's just like, you've just finished, you're done with, this narcissistic relationship from hell. And then they just kind of appear back in your life. Your narcissistic ex just appears back in your life. And suddenly they want to be your BFF. And that's a big red flag right there. Because those motivations, they're motivated by something else, something more sinister. Because the reality is, the reason they're even making that offer, it's more about them. Just so they can kind of keep you kind of smoldering off into the distance. It's like they're trying to keep a little scrap of a relationship alive that they can later go to later if they're craving an ego boost. Or, maybe they want just a little something on the side. But after like a breakup with a narcissist, what you realize is the relationship itself becomes even more dangerous, more toxic if we were to bring it back. It's almost like, having a teapot that's made out of chocolate. And as soon as you pour hot water into it, all it just kind of dissolves. The whole facade just kind of dissolves. And all that you're left with is this brown, gooey mess that you have to clean up. Now again, so when a narcissist seemingly kind of puts out this olive branch, keep in mind, they only bring those out when it serves them. And if history has shown anything, it's that these people are not relationship material. Deep down in their core, narcissists just have a manipulative intent, just a malice intent. And contrary to whatever the narcissist wants you to think, when narcissists try to make amends or try to revive the romance, it's not because they've suddenly grown a heart that's grown 2 sizes too big. No, it doesn't happen at all. It's all about control. It's just pure and simple control. They're like a puppeteer that's just kind of pulling strings. And you're living in this marionette of just manipulation. It has nothing to do with their heart growing, and all of a sudden they start to care for that little puppet. It's all about keeping you dancing in this twisted little tune, in their twisted little maze. And suddenly, this little puppet set that you're in, you start to realize, it's just made of cardboard and, paper mache. They don't even put the effort into, bringing in real furniture. Just something that looks like a relationship from a distance. But as soon as you get close, it all collapses. Because there's actually no substance to that friendship. Because there's no accountability from the last relationship. And there's one thing that we're all going to have to deal with when it comes to dealing with narcissism, and it's just dealing with this inflated sense of narcissistic injury and the need for compensation. So picture like an ego that's just so big, it's got its own gravitational pull. And imagine they're living in this world, this massive pull, and suddenly they hear the words, "It's over." It's like, what? You're tearing apart my fantasies? It's like taking a wrench and then throwing it into the engine of a jet plane, an F-15. It just challenges their belief in their own godlike status for control. And they can't believe that this is happening. It's like, how dare you? And in order to compensate, they might resort to all sorts of tricks and just like stalking and cyber stalking and sabotaging your relationships, your connections to your own community and your family and your network. And sometimes it escalates even further into how big of an ego that they had and how big their perceived injury is, and that sorts of revenge for getting back at you. It's not just like waking up and realizing that your partner was just like a dragon. It's like realizing that the partner's not only a dragon, not only breathes fire, but is also a pyromaniac. That's just is really starving now and just craving barbecue and needs to smolder people's lives and just leave a devastating just disaster everywhere in order to get, this much of their ego boost back. Because if I could do that, I must be really powerful, and it's not. It's actually a sign of extreme weakness and extreme insecurity. And post-breakup is kind of where it's just where we're exposed to more of who they actually are. Their narcissistic behaviors, we see how manipulative and self-serving in nature that these narcissists are post-breakup. It's all about control. It's all about dominance. It's not a genuine concern for your well-being. So when you're dealing with a narcissist, it's not about maintaining any kind of connection with them. It's more of a survival of getting away and staying away. And when they show up with this little friendship ring that they're trying to offer, you have to almost see that friendship ring as almost like it's made out of plutonium. And by putting that on and agreeing to take the narcissist back as a friend, it's just like there's going to be long-term effects of that. That radiation from that friendship ring is going to start to affect our entire body, our health, our mental ability, our ability to work, our ability to connect with others. And for many of us who are dealing with this, especially post-breakup, it's a very, silent struggle just to kind of cope, just to kind of get through the day. And it's kind of like, because narcissism, it almost seems like it just constantly lurks in the shadows. And it's almost like it's the dark underbelly of just domestic conflict. Unfortunately, it's a form of abuse. It doesn't always get the attention that it deserves. You can almost think of it as like an indie film that's, at the Oscars. Yeah, it's there. It has a really important message in it, but it's not the one that's in the spotlight. And for the victims that are trying to recover, there's quite often there's just a lack of attention and a lack of validation. And the realization becomes, it's like, yes, if you're a survivor of narcissistic abuse, the bruises that you have, they're not visible. And those scars from that encounter, they tend to run really deep. And yet society often downplays this kind of abuse. It's like being stuck in a movie where everyone insists that, you're overreacting to this ghostly presence. And like you're in a haunted house and it's just kind of all falling apart around you. And people that haven't really been through it, they just might chalk it up to just a bad breakup. They might see it as just like a rom-com ending. It's all going to get better in time. And it does. It is true. But that recovery period from a normal relationship and a narcissistic one is vastly different, because it's involving, trauma bonds and complex trauma that needs to heal. And for us to just kind of get our lives back and make sense of things. So being in these narcissistically abusive relationships for long periods of time, what it does, it has consequences. And these consequences are complex trauma. And this isn't your garden variety, rom-com breakup. Survivors of narcissistic abuse aren't just dealing with, heartbreak. They're actually battling with complex trauma. It's like they're in the middle of this emotional hurricane that's just spinning out of control. And it's so chaotic and it's so intense that they might come out of it with, PTSD or CPTSD and just struggling with flashbacks, having these horrific scenes in their heads, just completely repeating themselves again and again in almost like real time, as if they're reliving it again and again. And it's torturous for those. And it's like, it's a psychological thriller where the ghosts in the movie, they don't disappear when the credits end. That they're still there, they still haunt us, the memories, the flashbacks, all the horrors just keep piling back and back and back and back. All survivors really want is just to feel peace again, to feel safe again. And long-term exposure to these complex traumas, these horrific relationships, they can result in narcissistic victim syndrome. And this is, I know it's a mouthful, but it's important, NVS. And that in itself becomes a movie that's within a movie. Because inside the victim's mind, there's a whole new set of characters that are just being played out. And this includes, dissociation, compartmentalization, and just good old, cognitive dissonance is all part of it. It's a natural part of a very unnatural environment that they're in. It's a survival strategy that they use to survive trauma. It becomes a traumatic response. And survivors even find themselves in these twisted romances with their abusers, and it's very Stockholm Syndrome style. It's like being stuck, emotionally connected to an abusive person and not feeling that they're able to get out of it. It's like being a star of your own psychological drama where you find yourself both as the hero and the villain both at the same time. It gets very complex. And survivors of narcissistic abuse aren't just dealing with, a broken heart. There's like a whole bag of tricks that are just thrown on them. And one of them is like hypervigilance. And this is just constantly being on alert. It's like being stuck in a suspense thriller where you just feel like you can't trust anyone. Just being so watchful and just being on guard at all times. Not knowing what to do, not knowing who to talk to, not knowing who to trust. And that in itself is like living through a real life tragedy every single day. So what can we actually do about it? For one, this isn't something that we can just keep to ourselves, because it's not. Silence ends up locking us into the same patterns again and again. And healing is also a mandatory part of this process. Digging up all those little wounds and flushing everything out. Because if that doesn't happen, what ends up happening is, because we end up being predisposed to this kind of abuse, what we might find is that, when this one partner goes away, that we'll just end up repeating the patterns, repeating the cycles with just, the same people, different bodies, different names, but just various versions of this same toxic person. And if you repeat the same patterns, you're going to get the same results. And the next abuser might actually be worse. So the healing is vital. So on this healing journey, it's just like, it's time to just shine a spotlight onto narcissistic abuse and recognize the silent struggles that, survivors face. It's not just a bad breakup. The battle is against complex trauma and a journey that just kind of etches its way so deep in our psyche. It's almost like it's written on ancient hieroglyphs, like chipped out of rock, because those wounds, those core wounds, they hit us really deep. They hit us really hard. So I know talking about it is hard, but spreading awareness also makes it a little bit easier. Because it helps those around us who hear these stories more and more. It helps them, get more compassion for the victims and what they're going through. And remember that the survivors of narcissistic abuse, they're the actual heroes of these stories. And it's so important that we talk about what we're going through, especially with others who have also been through it, that also understand. Because it helps knowing that we're not alone, that we're not the only ones. And when we see that there's others who have broken the silence, it makes it easier for victims to also break the silence. And it helps victims, reach out for help, reach out for support, to seek out trauma-informed, professionals who can just guide and help break these bonds and these patterns. And then one day, just wake up from this nightmare and get out of these toxic, narcissistic environments much, much sooner. To learn self-care, to learn boundaries, to find themselves. Because quite often it's like what we end up finding is that we end up losing ourselves in these relationships, completely losing ourselves. And then when the relationship's over, guess what's left? It's just like, oh, am I an empty shell? Or if I am an empty shell, what do I want to fill myself up with? What is it about me that I want to be? What was I meant to be? What are my actual desires? What are my core skills? What are my core abilities? And once we actually can answer that question, then we can actually create and manifest the future of just strength, of resilience, of health, of happiness, of, financial independence. And all of our dreams can come true. Thank you so much for watching. If you don't know me or if you're new to my feed, my name is Miles and I'm a recovery coach. I really hope that you found this video helpful. I know there's a lot of information in here, and I know that the information probably came at you really fast. And what you might actually find is that watching this video a couple times, 2 or 3 viewings at least, can help you just kind of see all the spots that you missed. And it's normal for like a traumatized brain to watch information and miss big chunks of it. So you may actually find that when you watch it the second time, it's like, did that actually happen the first time? And what you remember is, yeah, it just probably triggered a flashback and made you think about something else. And then by just going back and watching it, a second or third time, and then all the information can kind of not just actually get through and solidify deeper into our core. And if you need more help, if you need more support, if you're looking for one-on-one attention, I have a recovery program that has helped thousands of people now recover and heal and get control of their lives back. So I hope you join me for the program. If you want more information on that, just all you have to do is comment Narcovery Recovery and in the comments, and I'll post a link to it, and you can find it on my feed, or you can find it on narcovery.com. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember, like and share. This information is really important that we get this information out, because there are people out there that really need to hear this. And hearing it in the right time, at the right moment, can really help change their lives for the better.